The dust hung in the Afghan air like a veil obscuring distances, distorting perceptions. Perfect conditions for almost anyone to miss. Through her scope, Alexandra Morgan watched the target's compound from her hide to 100 meters away, a distance so extreme that when she squeezed the trigger, the man would be dead before the sound of her rifle ever reached him. The Chetak M200 intervention rifle rested against her shoulder, its weight familiar after 72 hours in this position. Her body ached from the stillness muscles cramping in protest, but her mind remained sharp, calculating precise. The wind whipped across the valley between her and the target, changing direction and velocity in unpredictable patterns. Most snipers would abort. Most snipers would never attempt this shot. Alex wasn't most snipers. She watched as Mohammed al-Zahani, the target, a high-value terrorist responsible for orchestrating attacks that had killed 47 American soldiers, stepped onto the balcony of his compound. Intelligence indicated he'd be gone by morning, spirited away through an underground network of Taliban supporters. This was the only chance. Through her scope, Alex could see the man's features clearly, the distinctive beard, the set of his shoulders. She adjusted her scope minutely, compensating for the 2.1 kilometers of air dust and shifting winds between them. Her finger caressed the trigger as her mind performed calculations that most computers would struggle with. Wind speed, 23 km/h, gusting to 27. Direction west-northwest. Temperature, humidity 17%. Air pressure 29.32 in Hg. Coriolis effect 3.7 inches right at this latitude. Earth's rotation adjusting. Bullet drop over tooth 100 meters, 44.6 feet. She exhaled halfway, her heartbeat slowing as she entered the zone where the world narrowed to a single point of focus. The calculations became instinct numbers, transforming into minute adjustments of her aim. Al-Zahani moved. She tracked him, waiting for the moment of stillness that would follow. When it came, Alex squeezed the trigger with surgical precision. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. Through her scope, she watched as 1.9 seconds later, an eternity in the world of ballistics, the 419-grain solid brass bullet found its mark. The target's head snapped back violently before his body crumpled to the floor of the balcony. One shot. One kill. At a distance that redefined what was possible. Into her throat mic, Alex whispered 3 words. Target down. Confirmed. Fort Benning, Georgia. Present day. Alexandra Morgan's hands never shook as she cleaned the M24 sniper rifle. Not once in the 3 years since she'd taken the job as a range safety clerk. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency across the bolt assembly, cleaning carbon deposits with the precision of someone who understood the soul of the weapon. The fluorescent lights of the armory hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the workbench. None of the young soldiers who came to check out weapons from her ever noticed how her eyes automatically cataloged exit points whenever she entered a room, or how she positioned herself so that her back was never to a door. They didn't see how she instinctively calculated wind patterns through the range's open windows, or how her gaze would occasionally drift to the distant tree line, mentally measuring the distance in meters, calculating bullet drop and wind drift as naturally as others breathed. To them, she was just the quiet clerk who kept perfect inventory and never complained about overtime. Alexandra Morgan. Alex, to the few who spoke to her regularly, the unremarkable civilian contractor who'd requested the position after leaving administrative work at Camp Lejeune. Another cog in the military machine. None of them knew that they were looking at a ghost. "Morning, Alex," Staff Sergeant Peterson said as he pushed through the armory door, stomping his boots against the mat to dislodge the Georgia red clay. "Got the range prepped for the brass today." Alex nodded without looking up from the rifle. Ranges 1 through 4 are configured for standard qualification. Range 5 has the long-distance setup ready. Her voice was level, unremarkable, the tone of someone discussing grocery lists rather than precision shooting lanes that stretched out to 800 meters. Peterson scratched his belly and leaned against the counter, peering at the M24 in her hands. "You ever actually fire any of these beauties, Alex? Besides basic familiarization, I mean." The question was innocent enough, asked with the kind of patronizing curiosity reserved for civilian contractors. Alex allowed the small, self-deprecating smile she had perfected over months of similar interactions to cross her face. "I'm better with paperwork than firearms, Sergeant. That's why they keep me back here with the inventory." It was a lie wrapped in truth. She was exceptional with paperwork, maintaining records that impressed even the most detail-oriented officers. But her real talent lay in the mathematical precision required to place a bullet exactly where it needed to go from distances that made other snipers nervous. "Yeah, well, you clean 'em better than most of these knuckleheads who actually shoot 'em," Peterson said, nodding toward the door where a group of junior enlisted were gathering for their qualification course. Alex's hands continued their methodical work, her mind drifting momentarily to a different time, a different place. The memory of the stock pressed against her cheek, the perfect moment of stillness between heartbeats, the satisfaction of watching a target fall at distances others considered impossible. She pushed the thoughts away. That life was over. Alex's apartment was Spartan organized with military precision. It sat on the second floor of a modest complex 5 miles from Fort Benning, with clear sightlines to the parking lot and the street beyond. She'd chosen it specifically for its corner location and the ability to see anyone approaching before they reached her door. The furniture was minimal, a couch positioned so she could sit with her back to the wall facing the entrance. A small dining table pushed into a corner to maximize open space. Bookshelves filled with technical manuals and history texts, many focused on military conflicts spanning the last century. No photographs adorned the walls, no mementos or souvenirs hinted at her past. The closest thing to personal decoration was a framed topographical map of mountain terrain that, if examined closely, contained subtle markings that only she would recognize as firing positions and distances. Alex performed her nightly ritual with mechanical efficiency, checking the locks, drawing the curtains in a specific pattern that allowed her to see out while preventing others from seeing, in placing the Glock 19 on her nightstand within easy reach. She sat on the edge of her bed, rolled her shoulders to release the tension of the day, and tried to ignore the persistent feeling that she was living someone else's life, a pale imitation of existence. The nightmares would come as they always did. But they were manageable now. No longer the vivid, sweat-soaked terrors that had plagued her after Syria. Just dull, persistent reminders of a life she'd left behind and the consequences of a shot not taken. The news of Colonel James Donovan's appointment as the new commander of Fort Benning's Advanced Marksmanship Training Center spread through the base like wildfire. Veterans of Special Operations circles spoke his name with reverence. Former commander of SEAL Team 6, recipient of the Silver Star for actions in Fallujah, the man who led the operation that eliminated Abdul Rahman, the second in command of ISIS. Alex heard the whispers, felt the ripple of excitement among the cadre. She kept her head down, focused on her inventory logs, and hoped that the change in command wouldn't disrupt the carefully constructed anonymity she'd built over the past 3 years. Donovan arrived on a Tuesday morning, walking into the armory with the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to prove. 6 feet tall, with the lean, coiled physique of someone who maintained peak physical condition well into his 40s, his presence filled the room without effort. The salt and pepper at his temples and the faint scar that ran along his jawline spoke of experience earned the hard way. "Morning," he said to Alex, his voice carrying the slight rasp of someone who had shouted orders over gunfire more times than he could count. "I'm Colonel Donovan, looking for the M110s you should have received last week." Alex stood maintaining the deferential posture expected of civilian contractors addressing senior officers. "Yes, sir. They arrived yesterday. I've logged them into inventory and performed the initial inspection. Would you like to see them now?" Donovan's eyes, a penetrating blue that seemed to evaluate everything they landed on, studied her for a moment longer than necessary. "Please." As Alex led him to the secure storage area where the new semi-automatic sniper systems were kept, she felt his gaze on her back, assessing, measuring. Something about the weight of that observation sent a familiar prickle of awareness up her spine, the sensation of being in someone's crosshairs. She unlocked the cage and stepped aside, allowing Donovan to examine the weapons. He lifted one of the M110s with the easy familiarity of someone intimately acquainted with its operation, checking the action sighting down the barrel, testing the trigger pull. "These have the upgraded optics package," Alex offered, keeping her comments professional and brief. Donovan nodded, then turned to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You know your weapons, Ms. Morgan, sir. Alexandra Morgan. Former military." The question seemed casual, but Alex recognized the tactical probe. "No, sir. Just civilian training and familiarity from working here." Donovan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, doubt, perhaps, or curiosity. He placed the rifle back in its cradle with the care of someone who respected precision instruments. "Well, Ms. Morgan, you maintain an exceptional armory. I look forward to working with you." As he turned to leave, Alex felt a momentary urge to adjust her posture, to stand at attention properly, a muscle memory from a life she was supposed to have forgotten. She suppressed it immediately, but something in Donovan's slight pause suggested he might have caught the aborted movement. The door closed behind him, and Alex exhaled slowly. Something about Colonel James Donovan made her uneasy, in a way she hadn't felt since leaving active service. It was as if he could see through the carefully constructed facade of Alexandra Morgan Range safety clerk to the ghost that lay beneath. 2 days later, Alex's suspicions were confirmed when she walked into the armory to find not only Colonel Donovan, but also an older man she didn't recognize waiting for her. Tall and still straight-backed, despite his obvious age, the stranger wore civilian clothes, khakis, and a button-down shirt under a weathered leather jacket, but carried himself with unmistakable military bearing. "Ms. Morgan," Donovan said, "I'd like you to meet Lieutenant General William Hayes, retired." The name hit Alex like a physical blow. William Hayes, the architect of some of the most successful covert operations during the latter years of the Cold War. The man whose theories on long-range precision engagement had revolutionized modern sniping. The founder of... She cut the thought off before it could fully form, forcing her expression to remain neutral as she extended her hand. "General, it's an honor." Hayes took her hand, his grip firm despite his age. His eyes gray and sharp as winter steel studied her face with uncomfortable intensity. At 72, his features were weathered by time and experience, deep lines carved around his mouth and eyes, but there was nothing frail about him. His shoulders remained broad, his posture military perfect, his gaze alert and assessing. "The pleasure is mine, Ms. Morgan," Hayes said, his voice carrying the gravelly timbre of age, but losing none of its authority. "Colonel Donovan tells me you run a tight ship here." "I try to maintain standards, sir." Hayes smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Standards are important, especially when lives depend on them." There was something weighted in his tone, something that made Alex's instincts flare with warning. She glanced between the two men, noting the way they positioned themselves, Donovan near the door, Hayes directly in front of her. Basic room-clearing tactics. Create a crossfire position. Don't give the target a clear escape route. Colonel Donovan asked me to stop by while I'm in the area, Hayes continued. I still consult occasionally on specialized training programs, and I was curious about the armory setup here. It was a plausible explanation, but Alex didn't believe it for a second. Hayes hadn't risen to his position by making casual visits to inspect weapons storage. I'd be happy to show you around, sir, she said, keeping her voice even. Hayes nodded, then gestured toward the workbench, where she had been reassembling an M40A6 the previous day. You were working on that rifle yesterday, I understand? The question confirmed that they'd been watching her gathering information. Alex maintained her composure, though her mind was already calculating scenarios, exits, responses. Yes, sir. Routine maintenance. Hayes walked to the bench and looked down at the disassembled rifle. Colonel Donovan mentioned you handle these weapons with remarkable skill, almost as if you've had extensive training. Alex felt the noose tightening. As I explained to the colonel, I've been doing this job for 3 years. You pick things up. Hayes turned to face her, all pretense gone from his expression. Ms. Morgan, or whatever your real name is, you don't pick up the kind of handling skills I've been told you demonstrate. Those come from thousands of hours of specialized training. The room went still. Alex felt her body automatically shifting weight, centering her balance in preparation for whatever came next. Old habits, dangerous ones. I don't know what you mean, sir, she said, but the denial sounded hollow even to her own ears. Donovan stepped forward. We've been watching you for the past week, Ms. Morgan. The way you move, the way you handle weapons, the way your eyes constantly scan for threats. You're not civilian staff. You're operator-trained high level. Alex remained silent, evaluating options that were rapidly dwindling. Hayes sighed, his expression softening slightly. We're not here to expose you or cause trouble. If you're hiding, you must have reasons. Good ones, I imagine, given your obvious skill level. The unexpected understanding in his voice caught Alex off guard. She'd prepared for accusations, threats, even arrest, not compassion. What do you want? She finally asked. Hayes exchanged a glance with Donovan before responding. For now, just confirmation of a theory. He paused, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. You were part of Project Longshot, weren't you? The name hit Alex like a physical blow. Project Longshot, the classified program she'd been recruited into at age 22, the program that had taken her natural mathematical abilities and exceptional marksmanship and forged them into something beyond conventional military capability. The program Hayes himself had created during the Cold War to counter Soviet sniping programs. Her silence was answer enough. Hayes nodded slowly, as if confirming a long-held suspicion. I thought so. There's a certain signature to how my trainees handle weapons, even years later. Alex felt her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. If Hayes knew about Project Longshot, how much more did he know? Did he know about Ghost? About the 121 confirmed eliminations? About Syria? I left that life behind, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For good reasons, Hayes nodded. I respect that. Everyone has the right to walk away. He paused. But I'm curious, what name did they give you in the program? Before Alex could respond, or more likely evade, the door to the armory swung open. Staff Sergeant Peterson burst in his face, flushed with exertion. Colonel, sir, we've got an urgent communication from Division Command. They need you in the secure comms room immediately. Donovan straightened. What's happened? Sir, all they told me was, it's a hostage situation, high priority. Donovan and Hayes exchanged a look that Alex recognized immediately, the silent communication of men who had worked together in high-stress environments. Without another word, Donovan moved toward the door, Hayes following. At the threshold, Hayes paused and looked back at Alex. We'll continue this conversation later, Ms. Morgan. I think you'll find we have much to discuss. As the door closed behind them, Alex stood motionless in the center of the armory, her mind racing. They knew. Not everything, perhaps, but enough. Her carefully constructed anonymity was compromised. She should pack leave now, disappear again. But something held her in place. The look in Hayes's eyes had not been threatening or accusatory. It had been recognition, one professional acknowledging another. And beneath that, something else, a hint of respect, perhaps even pride. Her thoughts were interrupted as the door swung open again. This time it was Donovan, alone, his expression grim. Biz. Morgan, I need you to come with me. Now. The secure briefing room was Spartan, a large table surrounded by chairs, monitors on the walls, and a secure communications terminal at one end. Hayes was already there, along with 3 other officers Alex didn't recognize. They fell silent as she entered with Donovan. Sir, with respect, one of the officers said, gesturing toward Alex. This is a classified briefing. She stays, Donovan replied in a tone that brooked no argument. He turned to Alex. Please sit down. Alex took a seat, maintaining the alert posture that had become second nature during her years of service. Hayes watched her from across the table, his expression unreadable. Donovan activated the main screen, which displayed satellite imagery of a remote facility nestled in a mountainous region. 6 hours ago, a team of heavily armed individuals seized control of the Advanced Weapons Research Facility at Kodiak Point, Alaska. They've taken approximately 30 personnel hostage, including 15 civilian scientists and 15 military security staff. The image zoomed in, showing a complex of buildings surrounded by snow-covered terrain. Alex immediately began assessing the layout, identifying defensive positions, lines of sight, potential insertion points, then caught herself. This wasn't her problem. Not anymore. Initial reconnaissance suggests we're dealing with 8 to 12 hostiles, all equipped with military-grade weapons and demonstrating advanced tactical training. Donovan continued. Intelligence assessment points to Russian Spetsnaz or former Spetsnaz operating as contractors. What are they after? One of the officers asked. The facility houses several classified weapons development programs, Hayes interjected. Any one of them would be valuable to a foreign intelligence service. Alex listened, keeping her expression neutral while her mind processed the tactical problem. The facility's position offered numerous defensive advantages: elevated terrain, limited approach routes, excellent fields of fire. A direct assault would be extremely costly in terms of both assault personnel and hostages. We've been authorized to mount a response operation, Donovan said. But the facility's location and defensive position make conventional assault tactics problematic. Division has requested specialized capabilities. His eyes shifted to Alex, and suddenly she understood why she was there. The realization must have shown on her face, because Hayes leaned forward. Ms. Morgan, we have reason to believe you possess skills that would be particularly valuable in this situation. I'm a range safety clerk, she said flatly. Hayes didn't blink. And I'm Mickey Mouse. He slid a folder across the table. This came in with the intelligence briefing. Take a look. Alex hesitated, then opened the folder. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, obviously taken from surveillance footage. It showed a man in his 50s with close-cropped gray hair and the hard, efficient physique of someone who maintained peak condition despite his age. His features were Slavic, with high cheekbones and deep-set eyes. Something about him tickled at the edges of her memory. "This is the leader of the hostile force," Donovan said. "Facial recognition has identified him as Viktor Petrov, former Spetsnaz commander, now believed to be operating as a contractor for Russian military intelligence." The name meant nothing to Alex, but something about the face. "We have limited intelligence on Petrov," Hayes added, watching her closely. "But what we do know is concerning. He's an expert in counter-sniper operations, sieges, and hostage scenarios. He's been involved in operations in Chechnya, Georgia, and more recently, Syria." Syria. The word hit Alex like a physical blow. Suddenly, the face in the photograph snapped into focus in her memory, older now, but unmistakable. The target she had tracked for 3 days in Aleppo. The man who had stepped behind a civilian at the critical moment, forcing her to abort her shot. The man who had walked away, and 2 days later orchestrated the bombing that killed 7 SEAL team operators. Her hands, which had never trembled when handling weapons, now shook slightly as she closed the folder. "You recognize him," Hayes said. It wasn't a question. Alex looked up, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. "Yes." "From where?" Donovan pressed. "Syria, 2015. She paused, the memories flooding back with painful clarity. "He was my target. I had him in my scope for a clean elimination, but he moved behind a civilian at the last moment. I didn't take the shot." The room went silent. Hayes nodded slowly, his expression somber. "And 2 days later, he orchestrated the bombing that killed the SEAL team in Aleppo." Alex closed her eyes briefly. "Yes." When she opened them again, Donovan was studying her with renewed intensity. "You were the sniper designated for that operation, the one who was supposed to eliminate Petrov before he could implement the bombing plan." "Yes." "Then you were—" Donovan's voice trailed off as realization dawned. "Your Ghost." The code name hung in the air like smoke. Alex neither confirmed nor denied it, but her silence was answer enough. Hayes leaned back in his chair, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his weathered features. "I thought Ghost was a myth. The stories about a sniper with over 100 confirmed eliminations at extreme distances, most of us assumed they were exaggerated for morale purposes." "Not exaggerated," Alex said quietly. "And it's 121, not over 100. One of the other officers let out a low whistle, quickly stifled when Donovan shot him a look. "After Syria," Alex continued, "I requested reassignment to non-operational status. It was granted with the understanding that my identity and record would remain classified." She fixed Donovan with a steady gaze. "Which raises the question of how you knew to look for me." Hayes cleared his throat. "That would be my doing. When I created Project Longshot back in '82, I insisted on maintaining my own independent records of all operatives who went through the program. When certain incidents occurred in Syria that matched Ghost's operational signature, I began to suspect one of my trainees had been assigned to the Ghost program." He spread his hands in a gesture that was half apology, half explanation. "I didn't know it was you specifically until Colonel Donovan mentioned a range safety clerk who handled weapons with unusual expertise. Even then, it was just a theory until today." Alex processed this information, weighing her options. Her cover was blown. Her carefully constructed anonymity shattered. The life she'd built over the past 3 years was effectively over. Before she could respond, the door to the briefing room opened and a communications officer entered with a tablet. "Sir, We have new intelligence from the site. Satellite imagery and drone reconnaissance confirm that the hostiles have established defensive positions covering all approach routes. They've also moved the hostages to the central building, the one housing the main research laboratory. Donovan took the tablet, studied it briefly, then passed it to Alex without comment. She accepted it automatically, her training taking over as she analyzed the tactical situation displayed on the screen. The images showed a facility nestled in a mountain valley with steep terrain on 3 sides and a single access road on the 4th. The hostiles had established firing positions covering the road and helipad, making conventional assault approaches suicidal. The central building, a 2-story structure with reinforced walls, now contained all the hostages based on thermal imaging. "They've created a fortress," one of the officers observed. "Any frontal assault would result in significant casualties, both among our forces and the hostages." "Which is exactly what Petrov wants," Hayes said grimly. "He's forcing us into an impossible choice: abort the rescue or accept massive casualties." Alex continued studying the images, her mind automatically calculating angles, distances, and potential firing solutions. From the surrounding ridges, a skilled sniper with the right equipment could... She caught herself again. This wasn't her problem. She'd walked away from that life for good reasons. The nightmares. The moral weight of so many lives ended, the psychological toll of living as a ghost. There were reasons she'd chosen a quiet life, cataloging weapons instead of using them. But as she looked at the image of Petrov, the man whose life she had spared, who had gone on to kill 7 Americans, she felt the familiar cold focus settling over her, the detachment that had made her so effective as Ghost. "There's a third option," she said quietly. All eyes turned to her. "The ridgeline to the east offers clear lines of sight to several key defensive positions," she continued, zooming in on the satellite image. "A precision marksman could neutralize the leadership elements and disrupt their defensive structure enough to create an opening for a smaller assault team." "The East Ridge is 800 meters from the facility," one of the officers objected. "That's beyond effective range for even our best snipers, especially in Alaskan winter conditions." Alex said nothing, simply raised her eyes to meet Donovan's gaze. Understanding passed between them. "Not beyond all snipers," Donovan said softly. Hayes leaned forward, his expression intent. "Ms. Morgan, or perhaps I should call you Ghost, are you volunteering?" The question hung in the air between them. Alex felt the weight of the moment, the crossroads presenting itself. Return to the shadows, to the life she had abandoned, or walk away and live with the knowledge that she could have made a difference. And beneath it all, the face of Viktor Petrov. The shot not taken. The consequences that had haunted her for 3 years. "If I do this," she said finally, "there are conditions." Donovan nodded. "Name them." "My identity remains protected. When this is over, I want guarantees that I can disappear again if I choose to." "Done," Hayes said immediately. "What else?" Alex took a deep breath. "I select my own equipment. I plan my own insertion and extraction. And I work alone on the ridge. No spotters, no tower support personnel who could compromise my position." Donovan and Hayes exchanged glances. "That's not standard protocol," Donovan began. "I'm not a standard operator." Alex cut him off. "My methods work because they're mine. If you want Ghost, you get Ghost's way of operating." After a moment's consideration, Donovan nodded. "Agreed, with one modification. I'll be your remote support, coordinating between you and the assault team. No one on the ridge with you, but you don't operate completely dark." It was a reasonable compromise. Alex nodded once, sealing the agreement. "One last thing," Hayes said, his voice taking on a formal quality. "For the record, I need to hear it from you directly." Are you Ghost, the operative, credited with 121 confirmed eliminations in high-risk theaters, including Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, and Syria? Alex met his gaze unflinchingly. Yes, I am Ghost. The admission seemed to settle something in Hayes. He nodded, a complex emotion flickering across his weathered features. Pride, perhaps? Or vindication that his training program had produced someone of her caliber. Then let's get you what you need, he said simply. It's time for Ghost to emerge from the shadows one more time. The secure storage facility was accessed through a nondescript door in the basement of Fort Benning's administration building. Donovan entered a code, then pressed his palm to a biometric scanner. The heavy door swung open to reveal a climate-controlled room filled with specialized equipment. Your gear has been maintained according to protocol, he explained as they entered. Regular maintenance updates when new versions became available. Standard procedure for personnel who might be reactivated. Alex felt a strange mixture of emotions as she approached the storage locker bearing her operational designation. They had kept her equipment ready, as if expecting she might one day return to service. It was both reassuring and unsettling, a reminder that the military never truly let go of its most valuable assets. The locker contained her custom CheyTac M200 intervention rifle, modified with a proprietary barrel and action that increased both range and accuracy. Beside it sat her secondary weapon, a compact Scar-H with folding stock, and her personal sidearm, a customized Sig Sauer P226. The familiar weight of the CheyTac in her hands triggered a flood of muscle memory. Her fingers automatically checked the action, verified the tension in the trigger assembly, examined the specialized scope with its ballistic computer integration. "How does it feel?" Donovan asked quietly. Alex ran her hand along the rifle's stock, feeling the slight imperfections that made it uniquely hers. "Like putting on clothes that fit perfectly," she admitted, "but that you'd hoped never to wear again." Donovan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Ghost, I want you to know that after this mission is complete, we'll honor our agreement. If you want to disappear again, we'll make it happen. And if I don't?" The question surprised them both. Alex hadn't intended to voice, it wasn't even sure where it had come from. But now that it hung in the air between them, she realized part of her was considering alternatives to simply vanishing again. "Then we find a role that uses your skills without putting you back in the shadows," Donovan replied. "There are options, Alex. Good ones." She nodded, not trusting herself to respond further. Instead, she turned her attention back to her equipment, checking each piece with methodical precision. The tactical clothing designed for cold weather operations, the specialized communications gear, the high-resolution spotting scope, the rangefinder with atmospheric sensors. As her hands moved through the familiar checklist, Alex felt the transformation beginning, the psychological shift, from Alexandra Morgan range safety clerk to Ghost elite operative. It was like stepping back into a role she had played for so long that it had become part of her DNA. "There's a briefing with the full tactical team in 20 minutes, Donovan said. "Hayes will be there to provide intelligence on Petrov's likely tactics based on historical Spetsnaz operations." Alex nodded, continuing her equipment check. "I'll be ready." As Donovan turned to leave, she called after him, "Colonel, how did you know? What gave me away?" Donovan paused at the door, considering his answer. "It was the way you handled the M110 when I first visited the armory. Most people, even experienced shooters, hold a rifle. You became part of it." He shook his head slightly. "Once I started looking, there were dozens of tells. The way you enter rooms, how your eyes track movement, the calluses on your trigger finger that don't match your cover story." He offered a small, respectful smile. "You're very good, Ghost. but to someone who knows what to look for, excellence is hard to hide. With that, he left the door closing softly behind him. Alex returned to her equipment, her mind now shifting fully into operational mode. The tactical problem, the terrain, the weather conditions in Alaska, the capabilities of her target. Petrov, the man she had allowed to live, the man whose existence had cost 7 Americans their lives. The man she would now face again under circumstances neither of them could have anticipated. As she assembled her kit with practiced efficiency, Alex felt the last vestiges of Alexandra Morgan, range safety clerk, falling away. In their place rose the cold, calculating precision that had made Ghost a legend among the few who knew of her existence. The Ghost was re-emerging from the shadows, and this time the target would not escape. The briefing room had filled with the tactical response team, 12 operators from Delta Force who would form the assault element once Ghost created the opening. They fell silent as Alex entered, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. She knew what they saw: a woman of average height, with brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, nothing remarkable in her appearance to suggest the lethal capabilities she possessed. Hayes stood at the front of the room beside Donovan, studying a tactical display of the target facility. He looked up as Alex entered, nodding slightly in acknowledgement. "Team, this is our precision support element," Donovan announced deliberately, avoiding names or designations. "Operational call sign Ghost. Ghost will be providing overwatch and targeted elimination of key hostile elements to facilitate our assault." A murmur ran through the assembled operators. The call sign was known to them, Alex realized, a whispered legend in the special operations community. "Ghost will operate independently on the eastern ridgeline," Donovan continued, "with remote coordination through me. Once Ghost confirms elimination of priority targets, we execute our assault plan as briefed." One of the Delta operators, a captain with the weathered look of someone who had seen multiple combat deployments, raised his hand. "Sir, with respect, the Eastern Ridge is nearly 2 clicks from the target facility. Current conditions in the AO include winds gusting to 30 knots and temperatures well below freezing. That's beyond effective range for precision engagement." Before Donovan could respond, Hayes stepped forward. "Captain, I understand your concern, but I can assure you Ghost operates at ranges most snipers consider impossible." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "The operative designated Ghost currently holds the record for the longest confirmed elimination in U.S. military history to 100 meters in Afghanistan, 2010. The room went quiet as the operators processed this information. Alex maintained her neutral expression, though she noted the shift in their assessment, skepticism giving way to cautious respect. Donovan redirected attention to the tactical display. "Latest intelligence indicates the hostiles have consolidated their position. Thermal imaging shows most of the hostages are being held in this central area, with hostile forces distributed at these key defensive positions." The display highlighted 8 locations around the facility's perimeter, each offering excellent fields of fire against approaching forces. "Ghost will prioritize these 3 positions," Donovan continued, highlighting them on the display. "The command element here, the heavy weapons team here, and the communications specialist here. With these elements neutralized, the remaining hostiles will lose coordination and firepower advantage, creating our window for assault." Alex studied the targets, already calculating angles and approaches. The command element would be Petrov, the primary target. The one she should have eliminated in Syria. The one she wouldn't miss this time. "Weather forecast for the operation window?" she asked, her voice calm and professional. "Temperature holding at -15 Celsius, winds from the northwest at 20 to 30 knots. Barometric pressure 29.67 And falling, Donovan replied. Cloud cover intermittent, with periods of light snow possible. Alex nodded mentally, adjusting her calculations for the extreme conditions. Cold air was denser, affecting bullet drop. High winds would create significant drift. The reduced humidity would alter powder burn rates slightly. All factors that would make the shots more challenging, but not impossible. "Questions?" Donovan asked, looking around the room. The same captain who had spoken earlier raised his hand again. "Timeline for insertion. We deploy in 3 hours," Donovan replied. "Air insertion to landing zone Alpha 15 clicks from the target facility. Ghost proceeds independently to the Eastern Ridge firing position. Assault team establishes holding position here awaiting Ghost's confirmation of target neutralization." The captain nodded, then turned slightly to address Alex directly. "Ghost, how much time will you need to establish position and execute?" It was a professional question respectfully asked. Alex appreciated the directness. 90 minutes from insertion to establish position. Target acquisition and elimination sequence will take approximately 20 minutes once begun. That timing works with our operational window, Donovan confirmed. Any other questions? When none came, he nodded decisively. Gear up. We move out at 1700 hours. As the team filed out to prepare, Hayes approached Alex, his expression solemn. A word in private. Ghost. She followed him to a small adjoining office, curious about what the retired general wanted to discuss. Once the door closed behind them, Hayes seemed to age slightly, the weight of his years more apparent in the privacy of the small room. "I owe you an explanation," he said without preamble, "about how I knew to look for you." Alex waited, sensing that whatever Hayes needed to say was important to him. "Project Longshot was my creation." He began settling into a chair and gesturing for her to do the same. "Born in the darkest days of the Cold War, when we discovered the Soviets had developed a program to create snipers capable of operating at extreme ranges. We needed a counter." He paused, lost momentarily in memories. "We recruited individuals with specific attributes, exceptional visual acuity, natural, mathematical ability, unusual, situational awareness, and a certain psychological profile. People who could calculate complex ballistic solutions instinctively, who could remain motionless for days if necessary, who could take a life from a distance that made the act seem almost abstract." Alex recognized the assessment. It described her perfectly. "The program evolved over decades," Hayes continued. "As the Cold War ended, the focus shifted from counter-sniper operations to high-value target elimination in global counterterrorism efforts. But I always maintained my own records separate from official channels. I tracked the careers of my trainees even after I retired." He leaned forward, his gray eyes intent. "When reports began circulating about an operative designated Ghost achieving impossible shots in Afghanistan and later theaters, I suspected one of my long-shot graduates had been assigned to a black program. The operational signatures matched our training protocols too perfectly to be coincidence." "You knew it was me specifically?" Alex asked. Hayes shook his head. "Not until recently. I knew only that Ghost had to be one of my trainees. When the Syria incident occurred, a perfect setup aborted because of a civilian in the kill zone. I narrowed it down further. That kind of ethical decision-making, despite mission priority, was a characteristic I'd observed in only a handful of my graduates." He sighed, a weight of responsibility evident in his posture. Then Ghost disappeared. Operational reports ceased. It was as if the program had been terminated, or the operative had... He trailed off. "Been killed," Alex finished for him. "Or walked away," Hayes corrected gently, which, given what I know now, was the truth. "Why tell me this now?" Alex asked. Hayes met her gaze directly. "Because you deserve to know that someone recognized what you sacrificed. The toll that kind of work takes." He paused. "And because Petrov isn't just another target for you. He represents a decision that's haunted you for 3 years." The insight was uncomfortably accurate. Alex had spent countless nights reliving that moment in Syria, the civilian moving into her sight picture at the last second, the split-second decision to abort the shot, the devastating consequences that followed. "You made the right call in Syria," Hayes said quietly. "Even with what happened afterward, the moment you're willing to take an innocent life to eliminate a threat, you've crossed a line from which there's no return." "7 men died because I didn't take that shot," Alex replied, the guilt still raw even after 3 years. "7 men died because Petrov is a monster," Hayes corrected firmly, "not because you upheld the principles that separate us from the people we hunt." He leaned forward, his expression intent. "Ghost, I've trained hundreds of snipers over my career. The best of them, the ones like you, understand that the hardest decision isn't when to take the shot. It's when to hold fire, even when the cost is high." The words resonated with something deep in Alex's psyche, a truth she had been struggling to accept since Syria. Hayes seemed to sense the impact of his words, and he nodded slightly. "Petrov put you in an impossible position once before. He's likely to try again. That's why I wanted to speak with you privately, to make sure you're prepared for what might come." "I am," Alex said with more confidence than she felt. Hayes studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you are." He stood signaling the end of their conversation. "Good hunting, Ghost. Come back safe." As Alex left to finish her preparations, Hayes's words echoed in her mind. The hardest decision isn't when to take the shot. It's when to hold fire. She had held fire in Syria, and the consequences had been devastating. Now she would face Petrov again with the lives of 30 hostages hanging in the balance. This time, she wouldn't hesitate. The ghost was returning to the hunt, and this time, the target wouldn't escape. The C-17 Globemaster III thundered through the night sky toward Alaska, its cavernous interior dimly lit, and filled with the quiet intensity of operators preparing for a high-risk mission. In the rear section, partially separated from the main cabin, Alex methodically examined her equipment for the 3rd time. Each component had been checked, double-checked, and verified. But the ritual provided a focusing mechanism, a way to prepare mentally as well as physically. The Chaytak M200 intervention rifle. Her primary weapon lay disassembled before her. It wasn't standard military issue, but a highly customized version developed specifically for the most elite long-range operators. The barrel was match-grade stainless steel, with specialized fluting and an advanced suppressor system. The bolt action had been hand-tuned to eliminate even microscopic imperfections. The optics system incorporated a cutting-edge ballistic computer that could account for dozens of environmental variables. But the true difference was in the ammunition. The 408 Chaytak rounds had been hand-loaded to exacting specifications, the brass cases polished to perfection, the powder measured to tolerances of less than 1/10 of a grain. The bullets themselves were solid brass monolithic projectiles individually weighed and balanced to ensure absolute consistency. As Alex reassembled the rifle with practiced precision, she felt rather than heard someone approach. Colonel Donovan settled onto the bench across from her, watching her hands move with quiet efficiency. "Hayes says we'll be on the ground in 90 minutes, he said. "Weather reports confirm what we expected, -17 degrees Celsius winds from the northwest at 25 knots. Snow flurries expected to clear before we reach the target area." Alex nodded without looking up. The cold will affect powder burn rates. I'll need to adjust zero accordingly. The team has the thermal gear you requested. Arctic Operations Kit, best we have. I won't need it on the ridge, Alex replied, checking the tension on the trigger assembly. Too bulky, restricts movement. Donovan frowned. It's 17 below zero out there. Movement generates heat. Staying still requires mental discipline, not extra layers. She looked up at him finally. Bulky clothing affects shooting position, creates inconsistencies. I'll use the base layers and the ghillie suit, nothing more. Donovan seemed about to object, then thought better of it. This was Ghost's domain, not his. Your call. From the forward section of the aircraft, Hayes approached, carrying a tablet. Despite his age, he moved with the assured steadiness of a man who had spent decades conditioning his body for extreme environments. He settled beside Donovan, his weathered face solemn in the dim light. I've been reviewing the intelligence on Petrov, he said without preamble. There are patterns to his operational methodology that you should be aware of. Alex paused in her work, giving the retired general her full attention. Viktor Petrov was one of the Soviet Union's premier Spetsnaz operators during the late Cold War period. Hayes began his voice taking on the measured cadence of a tactical briefing. He specialized in counter-sniper operations and high-value target extraction. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, he continued serving in the Russian military until 2008, when he officially retired. Hayes made air quotes around the word, his expression skeptical. In reality, he transitioned to contractor status, working for various Russian intelligence services on deniable operations. Syria wasn't his first encounter with American forces, nor his most lethal. He handed the tablet to Alex, who studied the displayed dossier. Petrov's service record, what Western intelligence had been able to piece together, was impressive and disturbing. Operations in Chechnya, Georgia, Ukraine, Syria. Suspected involvement in assassinations in London and Berlin. A trail of precision violence spanning 3 decades. What stands out to me, Hayes continued, is his adaptation of classic KGB doctrine for modern asymmetric warfare. The Soviets developed a very specific approach to hostage scenarios during the Cold War, one that was designed specifically to counter Western tactical responses. What kind of approach? Donovan asked. Hayes leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. They called it the mirror box strategy. Create a tactical problem with no clean solution. Force your opponent to choose between equally unacceptable outcomes. Then exploit the hesitation that inevitably results. Alex recognized the concept. It was essentially what Petrov had done to her in Syria, positioning himself behind a civilian at the critical moment, forcing her to abort her shot rather than risk collateral damage. A tactical application of moral hazard. In Alaska, he's positioned his forces to make conventional assault prohibitively costly, Hayes explained. But that's just the surface level. Knowing Petrov, there's a deeper trap being set. What kind of trap? Alex asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Hayes met her gaze directly. One designed specifically for a sniper. For you. A chill that had nothing to do with the Alaskan weather they were flying toward settled over Alex. He knows I'll be there. Not specifically, but he's familiar with American response protocols. He knows that in a hostage situation where conventional assault is problematic, we'll deploy precision shooters to neutralize key targets and create an opening. Donovan frowned. So he'll have counter-sniper measures in place. More than that, Hayes said grimly. If he's following the playbook I'm familiar with, and his operational history suggests he is, he'll have constructed scenarios specifically designed to put any responding sniper in exactly the kind of moral dilemma that occurred in Syria. Alex understood immediately. He'll use human shields, position himself where I can't take a clean shot without risking hostages. Precisely. Hayes nodded. It's not just tactically sound, it's psychologically targeted. He knows that American snipers operate under strict rules of engagement regarding collateral damage. He exploits that moral constraint. How did you counter this in the past? Donovan asked. A shadow crossed Hayes's weathered features. In Berlin, 1985, I faced a similar situation. A KGB team had seized a West German intelligence officer and his family. They positioned themselves in a way that made clean shots impossible. He paused, seemingly lost in the memory. In the end, we found an approach they hadn't anticipated. Instead of trying for kill shots immediately, we used precision fire to create chaos, shooting out lights, hitting non-human targets near the hostage takers, essentially creating a psychological pressure that disrupted their coordination. Alex considered this approach. Indirect pressure instead of direct elimination. It's not standard doctrine, Hayes acknowledged, but against someone like Petrov, standard approaches are exactly what he's prepared for. The three fell silent, each processing the tactical implications. After a moment, Hayes shifted topics, his expression becoming more contemplative. Colonel Donovan is aware of Project Longshot's official parameters, he said, glancing at the younger officer. But there are aspects of the program that never made it into the formal documentation. Alex raised an eyebrow, curious about what Hayes was building toward. Project Longshot wasn't just about training exceptional snipers, Hayes continued. It was about understanding the outer limits of human capability in precision engagement. What made someone like you different from even highly trained conventional snipers? Different how? Donovan asked. Hayes looked at Alex, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, giving him permission to continue. Most people, even talented shooters, approach long-range shooting as an external process, calculating variables, making mechanical adjustments, essentially trying to solve a complex physics problem, Hayes explained. But a tiny percentage of individuals, less than 1 in 10,000, process it differently. For them, it's almost intuitive, a direct neural integration of spatial awareness, environmental factors, and predictive modeling. Alex had never heard her abilities described so precisely. Throughout her career, other snipers had remarked on her uncanny accuracy at extreme ranges, but few understood the fundamental difference in how she processed the variables. In the early days of the program, we used extensive neurological monitoring to study this phenomenon, Hayes continued. What we discovered was remarkable. These rare individuals, and Ghost here is perhaps the most exceptional example we've ever documented, actually process ballistic calculations through regions of the brain typically associated with spatial navigation and proprioception. They don't just calculate a bullet's path, they feel it as if the bullet were an extension of their own body. That's why I recruited you for the program, he said, addressing Alex directly. Your psychological testing showed this rare cognitive architecture. But even among the handful of candidates with similar profiles, your abilities were extraordinary. Donovan looked at Alex with new understanding. Is that how you made that shot in Afghanistan? The one at 100 meters? Alex considered how to explain something that had always been instinctual for her. I don't experience it as calculations, she said finally. When I'm behind the scope, I perceive the space between me and the target as a continuum. I can feel how the air will move the bullet, how gravity will pull it down, how the rotation of the earth will shift its path. She gestured to the ballistic computer mounted on her rifle's scope. This helps with initial data, but when it comes to the actual shot, especially at extreme ranges or in complex conditions, I'm not relying on the numbers. I'm feeling the path. Hayes nodded. Which brings me to something you should know before we reach Alaska. Something about the research facility Petrov has seized. Alex sensed they were approaching the heart of the matter. 3 years ago, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency began a classified program code-named Argus. Hayes explained, his voice lowering despite the privacy of their section. Its goal was to develop an artificial intelligence system that could replicate the intuitive ballistic calculation abilities observed in operators like you. An AI sniper system? Donovan asked, sounding skeptical. Not exactly, Hayes clarified. More of an augmentation system. The AI processes environmental variables and provides real-time adjustments to conventional snipers, essentially trying to give average shooters the capabilities of exceptional ones. Alex began to understand the implications. And this system is being developed at the facility Petrov has seized. Yes, Hayes's expression was grave. But here's what you need to know, Ghost. The baseline data for the Argus system, the neural patterns they're trying to replicate algorithmically, came from Project Longshot subjects, including you. The revelation hit Alex like a physical blow. Her most intimate abilities, the neural pathways that made her who she was as an operator, had been harvested, studied, and were now being used to create a system that would render those very abilities obsolete. When, she asked, her voice tight with controlled anger, when did they take this data? During your initial training and evaluation, Hayes admitted. It was standard procedure for all long-shot candidates. Neurological monitoring, performance metrics, cognitive processing patterns, all of it was recorded and archived. Without my knowledge. Hayes had the grace to look troubled. Yes, it was classified above your clearance level at the time. I didn't agree with the decision, but it wasn't mine to make. Alex processed this betrayal, adding it to the long list of reasons she had walked away from her former life. The military had taken her natural abilities, honed them for their purposes, and then harvested the very neural pathways that made those abilities possible, all without her knowledge or consent. So Petrov isn't just after any weapons research, she said, connecting the dots. He wants the Argus system specifically. That's our assessment, Hayes confirmed. With that technology, Russia could rapidly enhance the capabilities of their entire sniper corps. Strategic balance would shift overnight. And the system is based on my brain patterns, Alex stated flatly. Yours and a handful of others from Project Longshot. But yes, you were the primary source model given your exceptional performance metrics. The irony wasn't lost on Alex. She was being sent to prevent the theft of a technology designed to replicate and ultimately replace her unique human capabilities, a technology built from her own neural architecture without her knowledge. Does Petrov know this? She asked. About me specifically. Hayes shook his head. Unlikely. He would know about the Argus system in general terms. It's been a poorly kept secret in intelligence circles, but the specific sources for the neural modeling are among the most classified aspects of the program. A tone sounded through the aircraft, signaling their approach to the drop zone. Donovan stood adjusting his tactical gear. We'll continue this discussion on the ground, he said. Final equipment check in 10 minutes. As he moved away to brief the assault team, Hayes remained seated across from Alex, his expression troubled. I owed you the truth before we go in, he said quietly. About Argus, about your involvement. If I had known back then how they would use the long-shot data. It's done. Alex cut him off. Just another reason I left. Hayes nodded, accepting her response. There's one more thing you should know. About Petrov. Alex waited, sensing something significant coming. In 1987, I was stationed in Berlin. Hayes began, his voice taking on the quality of a man revisiting painful memories. Working counterintelligence against KGB operations, Petrov was active there, younger then, but already developing his reputation. We never met directly, but we were aware of each other's work. He paused, his weathered hands clasping together. There was an incident, a defector we were trying to extract. Petrov's team intercepted the operation. It went bad. Very bad. Alex could see the old pain etched in the lines of his face. I lost 3 good men that day, Hayes continued. But more than that, I lost a woman I cared deeply about. Anna was our translator, a civilian contractor. She was killed in the crossfire. Understanding dawned on Alex. You have personal history with Petrov. Hayes nodded once, his jaw tight. We've never spoken, never officially acknowledged each other, but he knows who I am, and I know him. For 38 years, our paths have crossed indirectly in this shadow war. Why tell me this now? Because you should understand that this mission isn't just about preventing technology theft or even saving hostages. Hayes met her gaze directly. It's about stopping a man who has built his career on exploiting our moral constraints, on turning our humanity against us. A man who believes that conscience is weakness. Alex understood. This wasn't just a tactical briefing, it was a warning about the psychological battle she would face. Petrov would try to place her in another impossible moral dilemma, forcing her to choose between mission and morality. I won't let him manipulate me again, she said firmly. Hayes studied her for a long moment. Just remember what I told you before. Sometimes the hardest decision isn't when to take the shot. It's when to hold fire. Alex finished for him. I remember. The older man nodded, seemingly satisfied. Good hunting, Ghost. Damn. The Black Hawk helicopter set them down in a sheltered valley 12 kilometers from the target facility. The assault team would proceed on snowmobiles for the final approach, but Alex would travel separately, making her way to the eastern ridge on foot. This was her preference, the stealth and silence essential to her operational methodology. As she stepped from the helicopter onto the pristine Alaskan snow, the cold hit her like a physical force. Minus 17 degrees Celsius with a wind chill that drove it closer to minus 30. Her breath crystallized instantly, forming a brief cloud before being whipped away by the gusting wind. Alex wore her base layers, advanced thermal materials designed to trap body heat while wicking away moisture beneath a white winter ghillie suit that would render her nearly invisible against the snowy terrain. On her back, she carried her rifle in a weatherproof case, along with the minimal equipment needed for the operation, her spotter scope, rangefinder communications gear, and enough water and energy supplements to sustain her for 12 hours if necessary. Donovan approached as the rest of the team unloaded their equipment from the helicopter. Comms check, he said, tapping his earpiece. Alex activated her own communications system. Ghost comms check. Receiving you clearly, Donovan confirmed. Satellite uplink is established. You'll have direct comms with me and with Hayes at the command post. He paused, studying her with professional concern. The ridge is 8 kilometers from here. In these conditions, I'll be fine, Alex interrupted. I've operated in worse. Donovan nodded, respecting her expertise. We'll maintain position here until you reach your firing location. Once you confirm readiness, we'll move to our staging area 5 clicks from the facility. Understood. As the assault team continued their preparations, Donovan lowered his voice. Hayes has been coordinating with NSA on satellite imaging. They've identified what appears to be counter-sniper positions around the facility. Petrov is definitely expecting long-range intervention. Expected, Alex replied. He'd be a fool not to. There's something else. Thermal imaging shows the hostages have been separated into three groups, one in the main research building, another in the administrative wing, and a third in what appears to be a storage facility on the north side. Alex processed this information, recognizing the tactical implications. He's dispersing high-value targets to complicate our response options. Exactly. If we focus on one location, he can threaten the others. Classic Soviet doctrine, Alex noted. Create multiple vulnerable points to divide enemy resources. Donovan nodded grimly. Hayes says it's straight from the KGB playbook. The helicopter's rotors began spooling up again, preparing for departure. Donovan checked his watch. We're on the clock. Satellite shows a weather front moving in within 6 hours. If we're not out by then, extraction becomes problematic. I'll be in position within 90 minutes, Alex assured him. Contact you when I'm set. Donovan offered his hand, a gesture of professional respect. Watch yourself out there. Petrov isn't just another target. Alex shook his hand briefly. Neither am I. As the helicopter lifted off, disappearing quickly into the gray Alaskan sky, Alex turned to face the vast white expanse before her. 8 kilometers of rugged snow-covered terrain separated her from her firing position. Another 2 kilometers beyond that lay the research facility and Petrov. She began moving, settling into the rhythmic pace that would allow her to cover ground efficiently without overexerting herself. In extreme cold sweat was the enemy moisture that could freeze against the skin and led to hypothermia. Alex regulated her breathing, controlling her body temperature through careful exertion management, a skill honed through years of operating in hostile environments. The landscape around her was stark and beautiful, pristine white slopes rising to jagged peaks, scattered stands of pine trees dusted with snow, the occasional rock outcropping breaking through the white blanket. In the distance, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, harbingers of the approaching storm Donovan had mentioned. As she moved, Alex's mind processed the tactical problem awaiting her. Petrov was expecting a sniper response, had prepared for it specifically. He had dispersed the hostages to complicate targeting solutions. He would undoubtedly position himself to make clean shots difficult or impossible, creating the same moral hazard he had exploited in Syria. But this time, she had advantages she hadn't possessed before. Hayes's insights into Petrov's methodology, advanced knowledge of the facility layout, and most importantly, awareness of Petrov's psychological tactics, the mirror box strategy designed to create impossible choices. After 40 minutes of steady progress, Alex reached a ridgeline that offered her first view of the target facility in the distance. She paused, removing her spotter scope from its weatherproof case. Through the powerful optics, she could make out the complex nestled in the valley below, a cluster of modern buildings surrounded by a security perimeter with a helipad and vehicle pool to the south. Even from this distance, she could see evidence of Petrov's preparations. Guard positions at strategic points around the perimeter. A heavy machine gun emplacement covering the main approach road. What appeared to be sniper positions on the rooftops of the 2 tallest buildings. She continued her journey, moving from cover to cover, using the natural terrain to conceal her approach. The wind was picking up driving snow crystals horizontally across the landscape, reducing visibility, but also providing additional concealment. In her earpiece, Donovan's voice came through clearly, despite the distance. Ghost Command. Satellite shows movement at the facility. Looks like they're bringing something out of the main research building. Alex paused, finding cover behind a rocky outcropping. Can you identify? Negative. Too small to resolve clearly. Appears to be equipment of some kind. They're loading it into one of the facility vehicles. Preparation for exfiltration, Alex assessed. They're getting ready to move the Argus system. Agreed. Timeline may be accelerating. How's your progress? 6 kilometers covered. 2 more to firing position. Understood. Maintain current pace. We're monitoring. Lekes resumed her movement, pushing slightly faster now that the operational timeline appeared to be compressing. If Petrov was preparing to move the Argus system, they might have less time than anticipated. The eastern ridge came into view as she crested another rise, a rocky promontory that offered a commanding view of the facility below. It was ideal for her purposes, elevated enough to provide clear lines of sight to all critical areas with natural features that would provide both concealment and protection from counterfire. As she approached her selected firing position, Alex began noting the environmental conditions with methodical precision. Wind direction and speed, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, all the variables that would affect her bullet's flight paths over the nearly 2-kilometer distance to the target. She settled into a protected hollow, a natural depression in the ridge that would shield her from view while allowing her to observe the facility below. With practiced efficiency, she removed the Chaytak from its case, assembling the weapon with movements so familiar they required no conscious thought. The bipod extended, providing stable support on the frozen ground. The suppressor attached to the barrel not to eliminate sound entirely, which was impossible with a rifle of this power, but to reduce the muzzle flash that might give away her position. The advanced scope mounted securely, its integrated ballistic computer ready to provide initial data points that she would then refine with her own intuitive calculations. Once the rifle was prepared, Alex positioned her spotter scope beside it, providing a wider field of view for surveillance. She arranged her minimal gear within easy reach, then settled into the firing position that had become second nature over thousands of hours of training and deployment. Ghost to command. In position. Donovan's voice came through immediately. Confirmed, Ghost. What's your visual assessment? Alex studied the facility through her scope, methodically cataloging what she observed. Facility appears as briefed. I count 4 external guard positions, 2 rooftop sniper placements. Vehicle pool shows 3 trucks and what appears to be a modified Humvee with mounted weapons system. She continued her survey, focusing on the buildings. Main research facility has reinforced windows, security doors. Administrative wing shows movement, appears to be where most of the hostile force is concentrated. Storage facility on north side shows minimal activity, likely where they're keeping one group of hostages. Any visual on Petrov? Negative. No confirmation of primary target. There was a brief pause before Hayes's voice came through the comm system. Ghost, this is Hayes. Based on Petrov's operational history, he'll maintain a command position with good visibility, but maximum protection. Likely inside the administrative building's 2nd floor, northeast corner. It would give him sight lines to all approach routes. Alex adjusted her scope, focusing on the indicated location. The windows there were partially covered, but she could detect movement behind them. Possible activity at that position. Can't confirm identity. Keep watching, Hayes advised. Petrov is methodical. He'll do periodic checks of the perimeter himself, not just rely on subordinates. That's when you might get visual confirmation. Alex settled in to wait, her body perfectly still, despite the biting cold. This was where her specialized training truly set her apart, the ability to maintain absolute immobility for extended periods, controlling breathing pulse rate, even blinking to minimize detection risk. Through her scope, she continued to observe the facility, building a mental map of patrol patterns, guard rotations, and potential weaknesses. The more she watched, the more she recognized classic Spetsnaz methodology in the defensive setup. Overlapping fields of fire, deliberate exposure of seemingly vulnerable points that were actually covered by hidden positions, careful management of sight lines. After 20 minutes of observation, Alex spotted movement at the main entrance of the administrative building. A figure emerged, tall, with the unmistakable bearing of command authority. Even at this distance, she recognized him immediately. Visual confirmation on Petrov. She reported her voice clinically detached, despite the surge of emotion at seeing the man who had haunted her thoughts for 3 years. Exiting administrative building, moving toward research facility. Through her scope, she studied him as he walked confidently across the open space between buildings, apparently unconcerned about potential threats. He moved with the easy grace of a natural athlete, despite being in his 50s. His winter gear was high quality and practical Russian military issue, rather than civilian clothing, suggesting he still maintained connections to official sources. "I have a shot," Alex reported, her crosshairs settling on Petrov's head as he paused to speak with one of his men. At this range, 950 meters, the shot would be challenging, but well within her capabilities. "Negative, Ghost," Donovan responded immediately. "Do not engage. We need to locate all hostage groups before initiating any action." Lekis maintained her aim, watching as Petrov completed his conversation and continued toward the research building. Part of her, a primal, vengeful part, that she rarely acknowledged, wanted to take the shot now, to complete what should have happened in Syria. But professional discipline prevailed. Donovan was right. Eliminating Petrov prematurely could endanger the hostages. "Target entering research facility," she reported as Petrov disappeared through the main doors. "Lost visual." "Understood," Donovan replied. "Maintain position and continue surveillance. Assault team is moving to staging area now." Alex settled back into her waiting posture, the rifle still positioned for immediate use. The cold was beginning to seep through her layers, despite her mental discipline, the unforgiving Alaskan winter extracting its toll even from someone with her training. In her earpiece, Hayes's voice returned. "Ghost, while we wait for Petrov to re-emerge, I want to brief you on what we've learned about the Argus system. It may be relevant to your tactical approach." "Go ahead," Alex responded, maintaining her visual scan of the facility. "Argus isn't just a ballistic calculation system," Hayes explained. "It's a comprehensive target acquisition and engagement platform. In its current prototype form, it requires a human operator, but the AI handles virtually every aspect of the shot, ranging environmental compensation, trigger timing, even breath control coaching." Alex processed this information, understanding the implications. Removing human judgment from the equation. "Not entirely, but significantly reducing its role," Hayes confirmed. "The operator still selects the target and makes the final decision to fire, but all the variables that make long-range shooting so challenging are managed by the AI. Based on neural patterns harvested from snipers like me," Alex noted, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from her voice. "Yes, your brain's unique ability to process spatial relationships and ballistic trajectories became the foundation for their algorithms." Hayes paused. "But there's something else you should know, something that wasn't in the briefing materials." Alex sensed the shift in his tone. "What is it?" "Argus has a secondary development track code named Nemesis. While Argus is designed to enhance sniping capability, Nemesis is focused on counter-sniper operations. It uses the same neural architecture to predict where an opposing sniper might position themselves, when they might take a shot, even their likely targeting priorities." The implications hit Alex immediately. If Petrov gets his hands on Nemesis, he'd have a system specifically designed to counter operators like you, Hayes finished grimly. "It would analyze terrain, weather conditions, tactical scenarios, and predict your most likely firing positions and timing with disturbing accuracy." "Has the system been tested operationally?" Alex asked, feeling a new dimension of urgency about their mission. "Limited field testing only," Hayes replied. "But the results were concerning. Against conventional snipers, Nemesis achieved an 87% success rate in predicting positioning and timing. Against elite operators, the success rate dropped to 62%, still remarkably high for this type of capability. Alex considered the implications. If Petrov obtained this technology, it would fundamentally change the balance of power in special operations. The unique human intuition that gave operators like her their edge would be systematically analyzed, predicted, and countered by artificial intelligence. "There's movement at the research facility," she reported, refocusing on her surveillance. "Petrov is exiting with what appears to be a case-hardened transport container approximately 1 meter by ½ meter. That's likely the Argus prototype," Hayes responded urgently. "Satellite confirms increased activity around the vehicle pool. They appear to be preparing for movement." Donovan's voice cut in. "Ghost situation is accelerating. Assault team is in final position, but we can't risk Petrov extracting with the Argus system. Priority has shifted to preventing technology loss." "What about the hostages?" Alex asked. "Still priority, but intelligence indicates they're being held as insurance until extraction is complete. Petrov isn't likely to harm them until he's ready to leave." Alex tracked Petrov through her scope as he carried the case toward the modified Humvee. "Target is moving to vehicle. Appears to be preparing for immediate departure." "Ghost, you are cleared to engage," Donovan ordered. "Primary objective is now preventing Petrov from leaving with the Argus system. Take the shot when you have it." Alex settled deeper into her firing position, her breathing slowing as she entered the mental state that had made her legendary. The crosshairs centered on Petrov as he placed the case in the Humvee, then stepped back to speak to one of his men. All the variables processed automatically in her mind: distance 927 meters, wind 28 knots from the northwest gusting to 32, temperature -17 Celsius, air density adjusted for altitude, Coriolis effect calculated, bullet drop over the distance substantial but predictable. Her finger took up the first pressure on the trigger, the shot sequence beginning. Breath halfway out, heart rate controlled, body completely still, despite the biting cold. Just as she prepared to complete the trigger press, Petrov moved not randomly, but with deliberate purpose. He stepped toward the research facility entrance where a group of people were being led out under guard. Hostages. Through her scope, Alex watched as Petrov positioned himself directly among the civilian scientists being escorted to another vehicle. Not behind them, as he had done in Syria, but among them, making any shot impossibly dangerous. "Target has moved into hostage group," she reported, her voice tight with controlled frustration. "No clean shot available." In her earpiece, Hayes's voice was grim. "It's the mirror box strategy. He's deliberately creating a scenario where you can't shoot without risking civilians." Alex watched through her scope as Petrov organized the loading of hostages into vehicles, always keeping himself positioned where a shot would endanger innocent lives. It was a deliberate tactic, one he had used before exploiting the moral constraints under which American forces operated. "All vehicles are being prepared for departure," she reported. "Estimated 5 minutes until convoy movement begins. We can't let them leave with both the hostages and the Argus system," Donovan stated firmly. "Assault team is ready, but we need an opening. Without neutralizing key targets first, a direct assault would be too risky for the hostages." Alex continued tracking through her scope, searching for any opportunity, any moment, when Petrov might expose himself for a clean shot. But he was too disciplined, too experienced. He maintained his position among the hostages with calculated precision. "Ghost!" Hayes's voice came through, carrying a weight of experience. "Remember what I told you about Berlin? Sometimes the solution isn't the obvious one." Alex recalled their earlier conversation. In Berlin, Hayes hadn't targeted the hostage-takers directly at first. Instead, he had used precision fire to create chaos to disrupt the enemy's coordination and control. She scanned the facility, looking for opportunities to apply the same approach. The vehicles themselves were potential targets, not the engines or passenger compartments, but specific mechanical components that could be disabled without risk to occupants. The facility's external lights could be eliminated, creating confusion. The rooftop sniper positions could be targeted, removing overwatch protection. "I need to create chaos," she murmured more to herself than to the others. "Break their coordination, force them to respond to unexpected threats." "Exactly," Hayes confirmed. "Petrov is expecting you to target him directly. He's prepared for that specific scenario. Change the parameters." Alex identified her first target, the communications antenna on top of the administrative building. Neutralizing it would disrupt the hostiles' ability to coordinate if they separated. She shifted her aim, calculating the new firing solution. Distance 1, 880 meters. Minimal wind deflection for the elevated target. She took the shot. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, the suppressor reducing but not eliminating the distinctive crack as the round broke the sound barrier. Through her scope, Alex watched the antenna shatter, fragments scattering across the rooftop. Immediately, she shifted to her second target, the spotlight mounted above the main gate, which would be used to illuminate the convoy's departure. Another shot, another hit. The facility below erupted into activity. Guards moved with increased urgency, clearly responding to the unexpected attacks on infrastructure rather than personnel. Petrov emerged from among the hostages, shouting orders momentarily exposed. Alex saw her opportunity and took it. Her third shot was aimed directly at Petrov, the firing solution calculated in that split second of opportunity. The round covered the distance in just over 1 second. But Petrov moved not randomly, but with the preternatural awareness of someone who had survived decades in the shadows. The bullet missed him by centimeters, impacting the wall behind him. "Missed," Alex reported tersely. "Target is now in cover." On the comms, Donovan was already responding to the changed situation. "Assault team, prepare to move. Ghost has created our diversion." But before the assault could begin, something unexpected happened. The main doors of the research facility burst open, and a group of hostages rushed out, not under guard, but running in panic, seeking escape from the gunfire. Through her scope, Alex watched in horror as Petrov emerged from cover, grabbed one of the fleeing scientists, a middle-aged man with glasses, and dragged him toward the Humvee, where the Argus case had been loaded. It was clear from his movements that Petrov was improvising, now abandoning his larger plan in favor of escaping with the primary objective. "Petrov has a hostage," she reported, "moving to Humvee with Argus system." "Can you take the shot?" Donovan asked urgently. Alex tracked the pair through her scope. Petrov was using the scientist as a shield, the man's body covering most of Petrov's vital areas. It was Syria all over again. A clean shot was impossible without risking the hostage. "Negative," she replied. "No clear shot." But even as she said it, Alex was processing the scene differently than she had in Syria. This time she was looking not just at the immediate tactical problem, but at the entire scenario. The hostage's position relative to Petrov, the Humvee's location, the surrounding terrain. "Wait," she said suddenly. "There might be a way." Through her scope, she could see that Petrov was moving toward the driver's side of the Humvee, still using the scientist as a shield. The vehicle was positioned beside a metal storage container, standard shipping container converted for cold weather storage. "I can use the container as a ricochet surface," Alex explained, already adjusting her aim. "Bounce the shot off the metal, to hit Petrov from an angle he's not protecting against. A ricochet shot. Donovan sounded skeptical. At almost 2 kilometers. It's possible, Hayes interjected. But the calculations would be, I can do it, Alex stated with quiet confidence, but I need authorization. It's still high risk for the hostage. There was a moment of silence on the comms as Donovan weighed the options. Finally, his voice came through resolute. You're authorized, Ghost. Take the shot if you have it. Alex adjusted her position slightly, aligning her rifle for the unconventional shot. The metal container presented a flat surface at precisely the angle she needed. If she could hit it at exactly the right spot, with exactly the right amount of force, the bullet would ricochet at an angle that would carry it into Petrov while avoiding the hostage. It was a shot that no ballistic computer could calculate. No AI system, not even Argus, could account for all the variables involved in a deliberate ricochet at this distance. It required that rare intuitive understanding of ballistics that had made Ghost legendary, the ability to feel the bullet's path as an extension of herself. She made minute adjustments to her aim, factoring in not just the primary trajectory to the container, but the secondary path the bullet would take after impact. The angle of impact would need to be precise to within a fraction of a degree. The striking velocity would need to be exactly right enough force to maintain lethality after the ricochet, but not so much that the bullet fragmented on impact with the metal. Preparing for ricochet shot, she reported, her voice preternaturally calm. Using storage container as deflection surface. Through her scope, she watched as Petrov reached the Humvee, still gripping the terrified scientist. He was shouting orders to his remaining men, clearly preparing for immediate evacuation. Alex took a slow, controlled breath, allowing her heart rate to drop even further. The world narrowed to a single point of focus. Not Petrov himself, but the precise spot on the metal container that would serve as her indirect path to the target. Ghost, Hayes's voice came through softly. Trust your instincts. Not the computer, not the calculations. Feel the path. She was already there in that mental state where physics became intuition, where complex ballistic equations transformed into a direct sensory perception of trajectory. She could feel the path the bullet would take from her barrel to the container, the precise angle of impact, the altered trajectory that would carry it to Petrov. As her finger took up the final pressure on the trigger, Alex had a moment of perfect clarity. This shot wasn't just about eliminating a target. It wasn't even about preventing the theft of classified technology. It was about proving that human intuition, that ineffable quality that no algorithm could fully replicate, still mattered. The rifle fired the recoil, absorbed into her shoulder, as the bullet began its journey. Time seemed to slow as she watched through her scope, tracking the nearly invisible path of the round as it covered the distance to the container. The impact was visible, a small spark against the metal surface, as the bullet struck exactly where she had intended. Then, obeying the laws of physics that Alex had internalized so completely, they felt like extensions of her will. The round ricocheted at precisely the calculated angle. Through her scope, Alex watched as Petrov suddenly stiffened, then collapsed, releasing his grip on the hostage. The scientist stumbled away unharmed as Petrov fell beside the Humvee. "Target down," she reported, her voice betraying no emotion, despite the extraordinary shot she had just executed. "Ricochet successful. Hostage appears unharmed." "Confirmed," Donovan responded, a hint of awe in his professional tone. "Assault team moving now." Below, the facility erupted into coordinated chaos as the Delta operators emerged from their concealed positions, executing a synchronized assault on the now leaderless hostile force. Without Petrov's command presence, The remaining Spetsnaz operatives were still dangerous, but lacked cohesion. Alex maintained her overwatch position, providing real-time intelligence on enemy movements and eliminating 2 more hostile targets who attempted to use hostages as shields. Within 15 minutes, the assault team had secured the facility, freed all hostages, and recovered the Argus system intact. "Ghost, this is command," Donovan's voice came through clearly. "Facility secured, all hostages safe. Argus system recovered. Mission successful." Alex acknowledged the report, but her attention remained focused on the fallen figure beside the Humvee. Through her scope, she could see that Petrov was still alive, though severely wounded. The ricochet shot had struck him in the upper chest, rather than the head, a deviation of a few centimeters from her intended point of impact, likely caused by microscopic imperfections in the metal surface. "Petrov is still alive," she reported, "wounded but conscious." "Medical team is en route," Donovan replied. "We want him alive if possible. Intelligence value." Alex watched as Delta operators secured Petrov, providing emergency medical treatment while maintaining strict security protocols. The man who had haunted her thoughts for 3 years, whose escape in Syria had led to the deaths of 7 Americans, was now in custody, defeated by a shot that no one else could have made, a shot that no artificial intelligence could have calculated. As she began the methodical process of breaking down her rifle and preparing for extraction, Alex felt a complex mixture of emotions: professional satisfaction at a mission successfully executed, vindication that her unique human capabilities had proven decisive against both Petrov and symbolically against the AI system designed to replicate those very capabilities. But most surprisingly, she felt a sense of resolution. The shot not taken in Syria had haunted her for years. Now the shot taken in Alaska, the impossible ricochet that had neutralized Petrov while sparing the hostage, offered a kind of redemption. "Ghost," Hayes's voice came through, carrying an unmistakable note of pride. "I've been in this business for 50 years. I've never seen a shot like that. No computer could have calculated it. No AI could have executed it." "Thank you, sir," Alex replied simply. "That's why Argus will never truly replace operators like you," Hayes continued. "It can process variables, run algorithms, make adjustments. But it can't feel the shot the way you do. It can't make the intuitive leaps that define true mastery." As Alex secured her equipment, preparing for the long trek back to the extraction point, she reflected on Hayes's words. Perhaps that was the true significance of what had just occurred, proof that even in an age of increasing technological sophistication, there remained capabilities that were uniquely, irreducibly human. "Ghost, once extraction is complete, we need to discuss your future," Donovan said, his voice carefully neutral. "As agreed, you have options, including disappearing again if that's what you want." Alex paused in her preparations, considering. For 3 years she had hidden from her true capabilities, buried her identity beneath the unremarkable persona of Alexandra Morgan, range safety clerk. But the events of this past 24 hours had awakened something she had tried to suppress, not just her skills, but her understanding of their value, their purpose. "We'll talk," she replied simply. As she began her journey back through the Alaskan wilderness, the storm clouds on the horizon had begun to dissipate, revealing glimpses of clear sky beyond. It seemed fitting somehow, a visual metaphor for the clarity that was emerging in her own thoughts about the future. The ghost had emerged from the shadows, and perhaps, just perhaps, she didn't need to disappear again. The extraction had been swift and efficient. Within hours of the successful operation, Alex found herself back at a secure military facility outside of Anchorage. The debriefing was scheduled for the following morning, giving her time to rest and process the events of the past 24 hours. But sleep proved elusive. In her Spartan temporary quarters, Alex sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the base layers from her mission gear, a military-issue blanket wrapped around her shoulders to ward off the lingering bone-deep chill of the Alaskan ridge. On the small table beside her lay her personal sidearm, the custom Sig Sauer she had carried for years. Old habits died hard. She'd never sleep in a strange location without it within reach. Her mind kept returning to the moment of the shot, that impossible ricochet that had neutralized Petrov while sparing the hostage. The pure physics of it was extraordinary enough, calculating the precise angle of impact, the exact velocity needed to maintain lethality after deflection, the minute adjustments for wind and temperature that affected both the primary and secondary trajectories. But beyond the mechanical calculations lay something more profound, that moment of perfect clarity, when the bullet's path had felt like an extension of her own consciousness. A soft knock at the door broke her reverie. "It's Donovan," came the familiar voice. Alex retrieved her sidearm and moved to the door, old operational instincts still governing her movements. She opened it to find the colonel standing in the hallway, still in his tactical uniform, though he'd removed the heavier gear. His face showed the fatigue of the mission, but his eyes remained alert. "Thought you might still be awake," he said, holding up a thermos. "Brought coffee. Real coffee, not the military issue swill." Alex stepped back, allowing him entry. "Thanks." Donovan poured the steaming liquid into 2 cups he'd brought along, handing one to Alex before settling into the room's only chair. She returned to her seat on the bed, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Just got word from the medical team," Donovan said after a moment. "Petrov's stable. The shot perforated his lung, but missed the major vessels. He'll live to stand trial." Lex nodded, absorbing this information with complex emotions. Part of her had wanted Petrov dead, final retribution for the SEAL team that had died because of her decision in Syria. But another part recognized the greater value of his capture. Intelligence that could save future lives. Perhaps even a measure of justice more meaningful than a bullet. "The Argus system," she asked. "Secure, being transported back to a facility in Maryland under heavy guard." Donovan paused, studying her. "It's remarkable technology, but what you did today, no AI could have made that shot." "Not yet," Alex replied, her tone neutral. Donovan shook his head. "Not ever, I think. The ricochet shot required something beyond calculations. It required intuition, feel, whatever you want to call it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee. Outside, the Alaskan night was in full darkness, the facility's lights casting long shadows through the window blinds. "Hayes wants to speak with you tomorrow before the formal debriefing," Donovan said finally. "He's got some ideas about your future." "I thought we had an agreement. I help with this mission, then I get to disappear again if I want." "The agreement stands," Donovan assured her. "But after what happened today, I think Hayes believes you have options worth considering." Alex said nothing, her gaze drifting to the window. After 3 years of anonymity as a range safety clerk, the thought of returning to some version of her former life felt both familiar and strange, like trying on clothes you once wore daily but had long since outgrown. "Get some rest," Donovan said, rising to leave. "Whatever you decide, it'll be your choice. You've earned that much." After he left, Alex lay back on the bed, not expecting sleep, but needing to rest her body if not her mind. Yet surprisingly, exhaustion soon claimed her, pulling her into a deep, dreamless sleep, the first she'd experienced in years without the ghosts of Syria haunting her unconscious mind. The morning brought clarity, both literal and figurative. The Alaskan sky had cleared to a crystalline blue sunlight streaming through the facility windows, while Alex's mind felt sharper, more focused than it had since before Syria. Something had shifted during yesterday's mission, a weight lifted, a balance restored. She dressed in the civilian clothes that had been provided for her, simple jeans, a sweater and boots, and made her way to the briefing room where Hayes had requested to meet her privately before the formal debriefing. The retired general was already there, studying documents spread across the table, a cup of coffee at his elbow. At 72, the early morning light accentuated his age, the lines in his face deeper, the gray of his hair more pronounced. Yet his posture remained military straight, his eyes sharp and alert. He looked up as she entered, a brief smile crossing his weathered features. "Ghost. Or do you prefer Alex now?" "Alex is fine," she replied, taking a seat across from him. "Though I'm not sure who that is anymore." Hayes nodded, understanding the identity crisis implicit in her words. "That's partly what I wanted to discuss with you, before the formal debriefing, before the decisions about what comes next." He pushed his documents aside, focusing his full attention on her. "Yesterday, you executed perhaps the most extraordinary shot I've witnessed in 50 years of military service. A deliberate ricochet at nearly 2 kilometers in Arctic conditions with a hostage's life in the balance." He paused. "Most people would call it impossible." "Most people would be right," Alex admitted. "I'm not entirely sure how I made it myself. But you did make it, and that's what I want to talk about." Hayes leaned forward slightly. "The official story, the one that will go into the mission reports and briefings, is that you used exceptional skill and training to execute a high-risk shot that neutralized a critical threat. All true as far as it goes." Alex waited, sensing there was more. "But you and I know there's a deeper truth," Hayes continued. "What you did transcended training or skill. It entered the realm of something else, something that defies conventional explanation." "Intuition," Alex offered quietly. "Yes, but even that word doesn't quite capture it." Hayes's expression was thoughtful. "When we started Project Longshot, back in '82, we were looking for individuals with exceptional abilities, natural gifts that could be refined and enhanced through specialized training. What we discovered along the way was something more profound." He picked up one of the documents from the table, a faded folder with classification stamps dating back decades. "This is from the original Longshot research," he explained. "The neurological studies we conducted on candidates showed something remarkable. In rare individuals like yourself, the act of calculating a long-range shot activated brain regions normally associated with proprioception, the sense of where your body is in space." "You told me this on the flight to Alaska," Alex noted. "I told you part of it," Hayes corrected. "What I didn't share was our ultimate conclusion that these rare individuals weren't just calculating shots, they were experiencing an extended form of embodiment. The bullet, the space it traveled through the target, all became extensions of the shooter's own perceptual field." Alex felt a jolt of recognition. This described precisely what she experienced when taking the most challenging shots, that sense of the bullet as an extension of herself moving through space that she could somehow feel. "We called it ballistic integration," Hayes continued. "The ability to integrate the bullet's trajectory into your own sensory experience, to feel its path as if it were part of your body." "Why keep this classified?" Alex asked. "It sounds more like philosophy than military secrets." Hayes smiled slightly. "Because the implications were significant. If we could understand this phenomenon, this integration of human consciousness with ballistic physics, the applications went far beyond marksmanship. It suggested possibilities about human potential that made a lot of people very uncomfortable. And that's why they used my neural patterns for Argus," Alex concluded. "They were trying to replicate this integration." "Exactly. But they failed." Hayes tapped the folder emphatically. The AI can calculate variables, adjust for conditions, even learn from experience in a limited way. But it can't achieve what you do naturally, that seamless integration of perception and ballistics. He leaned back, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. Which brings me to why I wanted to speak with you privately, about your future. Alex straightened slightly, preparing for whatever proposal was coming. As agreed, you have the option to disappear again, Hayes acknowledged. We'll create a new identity, place you wherever you want to go, ensure your security. That offer stands. But, Alex prompted, hearing the unspoken qualification, but I'd like you to consider an alternative. Hayes's expression grew more intense. Not a return to operational status, not field work, something different. I'm listening. The Argus program is at a crossroads, Hayes explained. Yesterday proved conclusively that AI alone can't replicate what operators like you do instinctively. But perhaps that's been the wrong approach all along. Perhaps instead of trying to replace human intuition with artificial intelligence, we should be looking at ways to enhance human capabilities through supportive technology. Alex began to see where he was heading. A partnership, rather than a replacement. Precisely. Hayes nodded approvingly. What I'm proposing is that you join the Argus project not as a subject or data source, but as lead consultant on human integration, helping develop systems that work with human intuition rather than trying to replicate it. The proposal was unexpected, and Alex found herself genuinely intrigued. You want me to help design the next generation of sniper technology? I want you to help ensure that whatever we develop respects and enhances the human element rather than trying to eliminate it, Hayes corrected. And beyond that, I want you to help train the next generation of long-shot graduates not just in technique, but in understanding and developing their own integrative abilities. And teaching, Alex said, testing the concept. Mentoring, Hayes qualified. Passing on not just skills, but wisdom. The kind that can't be programmed into an AI or written in a manual. Something about the proposal resonated with Alex, a purpose that went beyond the clean simplicity of elimination missions, but still utilized her unique capabilities. A way to contribute without returning to the shadows. Why me? She asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Hayes smiled, a genuine warmth breaking through his professional demeanor. Because you've proven something critical, Alex. Not just with yesterday's shot, impressive as it was, but with your decision in Syria 3 years ago. The shot I didn't take. Alex's voice tightened slightly at the memory. Yes, you demonstrated something essential that day, something no AI could ever replicate: moral judgment. The understanding that sometimes the hardest decision isn't when to shoot, but when to hold fire, even at great cost. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. That combination, your extraordinary technical abilities paired with moral clarity, is precisely what we need to guide this technology. To ensure that, as we develop these systems, we don't lose the human wisdom that must govern their use. Alex considered the proposal, finding it more appealing than she had anticipated. It offered purpose without the moral compromises of direct operations. A chance to shape future capabilities rather than just deploying existing ones. And perhaps most importantly, an opportunity to ensure that others didn't face the same impossible choices she had encountered in Syria without proper guidance. I'd have conditions, she said finally. Name them, Hayes replied without hesitation. Full transparency about how my input is used. No classified applications without my knowledge. And complete autonomy in the training program. I decide the curriculum, the methods, the priorities. Hayes nodded. Agreed. Anything else? Alex considered for a moment. I want access to all Project Longshot records, Everything about the original program, including the neurological research. If I'm going to help develop this technology, I need to understand its foundations. That can be arranged, Hayes assured her, with appropriate security clearances, of course. A final thought occurred to Alex. And Petrov. I want to be kept informed about his interrogation, his trial, everything. Not for revenge, for closure. Hayes studied her for a long moment before nodding. I'll make sure of it personally. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision settling between them. Through the window, Alex could see the snow-covered mountains in the distance, their peaks gleaming in the morning sun. There was a symmetry to it all from Afghanistan's dusty mountains, where Ghost had made her legendary shot, to Alaska's frozen ridges, where she had perhaps made her most important one. You don't have to decide immediately, Hayes said, breaking the silence. Take some time to— I'll do it, Alex interrupted, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Not forever, maybe, but for now, it feels right. A smile crossed Hayes's weathered features, not the tight professional acknowledgement he typically offered, but something warmer, more personal. I was hoping you'd say that. He extended his hand across the table. As Alex took it, she felt the weight of the moment, not just a professional agreement, but a passing of a torch from one generation to the next. A continuity of purpose that transcended individual missions or operations. The formal debriefing starts in 30 minutes, Hayes said, gathering his documents. But I think the most important conversation has already happened. As he moved toward the door, he paused, turning back to her. You know, after Syria, when you disappeared, I was concerned we'd lost one of our finest operators. Now I realize we may have gained something far more valuable, a teacher. After Hayes left, Alex remained at the table contemplating the unexpected turn her life had taken. 3 days ago, she had been Alexandra Morgan Range Safety Clerk, hiding from her past and her capabilities. Now she was stepping into a future that acknowledged those capabilities but redirected them towards something constructive, something that might actually help resolve the moral dilemmas that had driven her from service in the first place. It wasn't a path she had ever envisioned for herself. But as the morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating the briefing room's tactical maps and mission parameters, it felt surprisingly right. 3 months later, Alex stood at the front of a specialized training facility at Fort Bragg, facing a small group of operators selected for the advanced marksmanship program she had developed with Hayes. The room was designed for her specific teaching methodology, part traditional classroom, part high-tech simulation environment, with advanced neurological monitoring equipment discreetly integrated into the training stations. The 8 candidates seated before her represented the cream of America's Special Operations community, Delta SEAL Team 624th STS Force Recon, each selected not just for their already impressive shooting skills, but for the specific cognitive markers that suggested they might possess the integrative abilities that Project Longshot had identified decades earlier. Welcome to Advanced Ballistic Integration. Alex began, her voice carrying the quiet authority that came naturally after 3 months in her new role. You've all been told this is an advanced sniper course. That's true, but incomplete. What we're really exploring here is the interface between human perception and ballistic physics, the ability to feel a shot's trajectory rather than merely calculate it. She moved to a console at the front of the room, activating a display that showed brain imaging scans, her own, though that detail wasn't indicated in the presentation. Traditional marksmanship training focuses on mechanical skills, breath control, trigger discipline, position, consistency, all essential foundations. But what separates truly exceptional long-range shooters from the merely excellent isn't mechanics, it's perception. The display shifted to show comparative brain activity patterns between conventional snipers and those with integrative abilities. Most experienced shooters process ballistic calculations primarily through the prefrontal cortex, conscious problem-solving. But a small percentage process this information differently activating regions associated with spatial awareness and proprioception. In essence, they don't just calculate a bullet's path, they feel it. She paused, studying the faces before her. Most showed polite attention, but two, a female Army Ranger and a male Force Recon Marine, displayed the subtle markers of recognition. They'd experienced this phenomenon themselves, perhaps without understanding its significance. Over the next 12 weeks, we'll be working to identify and develop this capability in each of you using both traditional training methods and some newer approaches. Alex gestured toward the simulation pods at the back of the room, cutting-edge virtual environments that could replicate the most challenging shooting scenarios imaginable, complete with neurological monitoring to help the operators understand and develop their integrative abilities. The technology is impressive, she continued, but remember this, it's supportive, not primary. The goal isn't to make you dependent on advanced systems, but to help you develop natural abilities that technology can then enhance. She paused, making eye contact with each candidate in turn. Because ultimately, in the field when conditions are at their worst and the stakes are highest, it won't be algorithms making the critical decisions. It will be you, your judgment, your perception, your integration of all factors, both measurable and immeasurable. At the back of the room, the door opened quietly. Alex glanced up to see Hayes enter, accompanied by Colonel Donovan and another figure she didn't immediately recognize, a civilian in a well-tailored suit, likely from one of the intelligence agencies overseeing the program. She acknowledged them with a nod before returning her attention to the class. Before we begin the technical portion of today's session, I want to share something with you that goes beyond ballistics or marksmanship technique. Something that took me years and some painful experiences to fully understand. The room went completely still, the operators sensing the shift to something profound. The most difficult decision you'll ever make behind a rifle isn't when to take the shot, Alex said, her voice quiet, but carrying clearly through the room. It's when to hold fire even at great personal cost, even when every calculation tells you to shoot. She could see recognition in some of their eyes, operators who had faced their own impossible choices in the field. We'll spend hundreds of hours honing your technical abilities, developing your integrative perception, pushing the boundaries of what's possible at extreme ranges. But none of that matters if you can't also integrate the moral dimension of your role. From the back of the room, Hayes gave an almost imperceptible nod of approval. This was precisely why he had wanted her for this position, not just her technical expertise, but her hard-won wisdom. Now, Alex continued, transitioning back to the technical focus. Let's talk about the neurological foundations of ballistic integration and how we'll be measuring and developing your capabilities over the coming weeks. As she led the class through the first technical briefing, Alex felt a sense of purpose that had been missing during her years in the shadows, as Ghost and her subsequent retreat into anonymity as a range safety clerk. Here she was, neither a weapon nor a ghost. She was a guide helping shape the next generation of operators who would face the same challenges and moral dilemmas she had encountered. After the session concluded, the operators moved to the simulation area to begin their preliminary assessments. Hayes approached Alex at the front of the room, Donovan and the civilian visitor following. "Impressive start," Hayes said with genuine approval. "You've got them engaged on both the technical and philosophical levels." "That's the point, isn't it?" Alex replied. "Integration of capabilities and conscience." "Precisely." Hayes turned to introduce the civilian. "Alex, this is Dr. Robert Chen, Chief Scientist for the Argus program. He's been eager to meet you." Alex felt a jolt of recognition. Dr. Chen, the hostage Petrov had used as a shield, the scientist who had been working with her neural patterns to develop the AI system. The man she had saved with her impossible ricochet shot. "Dr. Morgan," Chen said, extending his hand. His voice carried the slight tremor of someone still processing trauma, but his eyes were clear and focused. "I've been hoping for this opportunity since Alaska, to thank you personally." As Alex shook his hand, she felt the strange circularity of their connection. Her neural patterns had informed his research. His life had been saved by the very capabilities he was trying to replicate algorithmically. "No thanks necessary, Dr. Chen," she replied simply. "I disagree," Chen said earnestly. "Not just for the obvious reason, though I'm certainly grateful to be alive, but for something more significant." He gestured toward the training area where the operators were beginning their sessions. "What you did that day that shot it fundamentally changed our approach to the entire Argus program." "How so?" Alex asked, genuinely curious. "For years we've been trying to replicate human expertise through artificial intelligence," Chen explained, "essentially trying to make the human element obsolete. But what you demonstrated was something no algorithm could achieve: integration of technical precision with moral judgment executed under extreme pressure." He shook his head, a scientist still coming to terms with a paradigm shift. "It forced us to reconsider our entire approach. Instead of replacing human operators, we're now focused on developing systems that enhance their natural capabilities, augmentation rather than replacement." Donovan nodded agreement. "The Pentagon has already adjusted funding priorities based on the Alaska operation. Less emphasis on autonomous systems, more on human-AI integration." "Your shot changed more than just the tactical situation that day," Hayes added quietly. "It may have changed the entire trajectory of military technology development." Alex absorbed this information, feeling the weight of its significance. What had begun as a desperate attempt to neutralize Petrov while sparing a hostage had rippled outward, affecting military doctrine and technology development in ways she could never have anticipated. "There's something else you should know," Hayes said, his expression growing more serious. "About Petrov." Alex tensed slightly. "What about him?" "His interrogation has yielded significant intelligence," Hayes explained, "including confirmation that he was specifically targeting you in Syria. The civilian he used as a shield wasn't random. It was a deliberate tactic to force you into exactly the situation that occurred. He knew I wouldn't take the shot if it endangered a civilian." Alex concluded, the pieces falling into place. "Yes, he'd studied American ROEs and psychological profiles of our operators. He knew our moral constraints and exploited them deliberately. The information should have angered her confirmation that Petrov had manipulated her decision in Syria, leading to the deaths of 7 Americans. Instead, Alex felt a strange sense of validation. Her decision not to shoot had been exploited, yes, but it had also been right. She had refused to sacrifice an innocent life, even at terrible cost. "There's more," Donovan added. "Intelligence indicates that Petrov wasn't acting alone in Alaska. He was part of a larger Russian operation to acquire the Argus technology. The team that backed him up is still active, and they're aware of your role in his capture." Alex understood the implication immediately. "They'll be looking for revenge." Hayes nodded grimly. "Potentially. Which is why we've enhanced security here and why your new identity has been given the highest protection protocols." "I'm not afraid of them," Alex said simply. "No, but you should be aware," Hayes countered. "This may not be over." Alex glanced toward the training area where her students were engaged in their preliminary assessments. "It's never over. That's the nature of what we do. But at least now we're preparing the next generation to face these challenges with both technical excellence and moral clarity. Hayes studied her for a moment, then smiled a rare, genuine expression that transformed his weathered features. You know, when I recruited you for Project Longshot all those years ago, I saw your potential as an operator. What I never anticipated was your potential as a teacher. Neither did I, Alex admitted. But it feels right. Like this is where I'm supposed to be. As Chen and Donovan moved toward the training area to observe the assessment sessions, Hayes remained beside Alex, his expression growing reflective. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," he said, his voice lowering slightly. "Something personal." Alex waited, sensing the importance of whatever was coming. "I'm retiring, again. This time, for real." Hayes gazed toward the training floor. "The doctors found something last month. Nothing immediate, but my operational timeline has been significantly reduced." The news hit Alex harder than she had expected. In the 3 months they had worked together developing this program, Hayes had become more than just a colleague or mentor. He had become something akin to the father figure she had never had in her own life. "I'm sorry," she said simply. Hayes shook his head. "Don't be. I've had a good run, 50 years serving this country in one capacity or another, longer than most get. And now I have the satisfaction of knowing the work continues in capable hands." He turned to face her directly. "The program is yours now, Alex. Not just the training curriculum, but the philosophical foundation, the integration of capability and conscience. The understanding that what makes us effective isn't just technical excellence, but the moral framework that guides its application." The responsibility was enormous, but Alex found herself ready to accept it. 3 months ago, she had been hiding from her abilities and her past. Now she was embracing them, redirecting them towards something constructive, something that might help others navigate the moral complexities she had faced. "I won't let you down," she promised. Hayes smiled again, placing a hand briefly on her shoulder. "I know. That's why, of all the operators I've trained over the decades, you're the one I'm entrusting with this legacy." As Hayes turned to join Donovan and Chen at the training stations, Alex remained at the front of the classroom contemplating the unexpected arc of her life. From gifted recruit to legendary operative to anonymous clerk to mentor and guide, each transition had seemed impossible until it happened. Through the windows she could see the training grounds where the next phase of the program would take place, the outdoor ranges where theory would become practice, where the integration of perception and ballistics would be tested against real-world conditions. Beyond that lay the mountains of North Carolina, their forested slopes reminiscent of terrains where she had once operated as Ghost. But she was no longer a ghost, neither the legendary operative nor the anonymous clerk hiding from her past. She had become something new, a bridge between generations, between technology and humanity, between capability and conscience. As she gathered her materials to join the assessment sessions, Alex felt a sense of purpose more profound than any mission she had undertaken as Ghost. Her 121 confirmed eliminations had earned her a place in the shadowy legends of special operations. But what she was building now, this integration of technical excellence and moral clarity, might leave a more significant legacy. 6 months earlier, she had made the shot of a lifetime, an impossible ricochet that had saved a hostage and captured a terrorist. But perhaps her most important contribution wouldn't be any single shot taken, but rather what she taught others about when not to shoot. About holding fire, even when every calculation said otherwise. About the integration of capability and conscience that defined truly exceptional operators. The Ghost had emerged from the shadows, not to vanish again, but to guide others through the complex moral and technical terrain she had navigated herself. And in doing so, Alexandra Morgan had finally found her true target. 2,000 miles away, in a secure medical facility at Fort Leavenworth, Viktor Petrov sat in his wheelchair by the window of his closely guarded room. His injuries from Alaska were healing slowly, the lung damage from the ricochet shot causing chronic pain that the doctors said might never fully subside. But physical discomfort was the least of Petrov's concerns. His mind remained sharp, calculating, focused on the future rather than the past. The American intelligence officers who interrogated him regularly believed they were extracting valuable information, and they were, but only what he chose to give them. Small pieces of a much larger puzzle, carefully selected to advance his longer-term strategy. A strategy that centered on the woman who had put him in this chair. The operative they called Ghost. He had underestimated her in Alaska, failed to anticipate the impossible shot she had executed. It was a mistake he would not make again. Because, despite his capture, despite his apparent defeat, Petrov's mission was far from over. The network he had built over decades remained intact, operating in the shadows, waiting for his signal. And though he sat imprisoned, that signal had already been sent. The hunt for Ghost had begun. The game wasn't over. It was merely entering its next phase. Petrov smiled slightly as he gazed out at the prison yard below. The Americans thought they had won. The woman who had shot him believed she had found redemption, purpose, a new beginning. But in Petrov's experience, there were no new beginnings, only continuations. And this particular story was far from its conclusion. He closed his eyes, picturing the shot that had put him here, the impossible ricochet that had defied physics and probability. A shot that no technology could have calculated, executed by a woman whose abilities transcended conventional explanation. She was remarkable, this Ghost, worthy of respect, worthy of a proper conclusion to their long-running engagement. Until next time, Petrov murmured to himself, his smile deepening as he contemplated the moves yet to come in their unfinished game. Outside his window, snow began to fall, a reminder of the Alaskan ridge, where their last encounter had played out, where the first shot in their renewed conflict had been fired, but certainly not the last.